At the time of me recording this video, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet have come and passed their 1-year anniversary. Even though this is my first review video on this channel, I happen to also be an active member of the Pokemon community here on YouTube, creating videos as Pancake Wizard 12. With this knowledge, it would seem like I would have already beaten the games, but in actuality, this playthrough was my first time completing the story. I'm not sure what turned me off from playing them for so long, but now that I have played them, I have a few reasons why they aren't my favorite games in the series. I don't want to just outright call them bad games, but maybe they just aren't the Pokemon games for me. Before we get into the good, the bad, and the ugly with Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, I first want to explain my backstory with Pokemon so you can fully understand where I'm coming from. So, I'm 26 years old, and if you do the math, you would see that I'm a bit too young to be considered a Gen 1er, which is someone who started playing Pokemon when they came out in 1996. My first real experience with the franchise was with Generation 3, Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire. Those games were my everything back in elementary school. Me and my friends would play them for hours, we would look up secrets, and our love for the series as a collective only grew when Fire Red, Leaf Green, and then Emerald came out in the following years. While I consider Pokemon to be my favorite franchise of all time, I wouldn't always say that I've been the biggest fan. I've taken so many generations off, and honestly I've barely ever been up to date with the new games, and only recently has that started with the creation of my channel Pancake Wizard 12. I skipped generations 4, 5, 7, and now 9 at the time they were released to the public. I either went back and I played them after a remake came out, or honestly when I was just looking for that nostalgia hit that Pokemon gives me more than any other series that I play. Scarlet and Violet, however, were a bit different. I almost had a sense of FOMO this past year when not playing, mostly because I was left out in conversations about the new Pokemon that had come out, or just talking about the story in general. It hasn't helped whatsoever that the last games in the series, Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl, and even Legends Arceus, just didn't live up to my expectations, and I didn't really have a fun time playing them. On top of all of that, the outcry of hate for Scarlet and Violet just kind of killed the games for me, and I had no want to pick them up and play them, besides just wanting to be in the same realm as my friends and whenever we were chatting about the games. So the question remains, why did I come back a whole year later and decide to play Scarlet and Violet? So I went ahead and watched a few spoiler-free reviews just to kind of see what I was missing and maybe if I wanted to go back and watch them. So I talked to my friends as well, and after a few months I decided, okay, I want to give these games a fair chance, and I want to get to the nitty-gritty on how I feel about the games, because I know everyone's opinion is a bit different, and it was kind of my way to segment myself into making review videos since I like Pokemon so much and I knew that I was going to have a lot to talk about when it comes to Pokemon. So, we're here. The video you're about to watch is my review of Scarlet and Violet. It's going to be how I feel, my opinions on the game, and honestly just if I think that you should play them even though they've been out for a whole year. And if you're watching this video, you probably have already played the games. I would like to use this platform to discuss how I feel about the games and just what I think needs to be changed for future entries so that myself as well as some of the more old fans or the old heads of Pokemon can actually get some enjoyment out of this new sense of where the franchise is headed now that we've made our way into the open world genre of video games. So starting now, we will be discussing everything and anything Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. So just know that you've been warned and that spoilers will be ahead. I know I probably edited a little thing with some Pokemon, with some of the content. I tried to use early game footage at there so you wouldn't be spoiled too much, but just know that we're getting into the review now. So if you keep watching, you're going to be spoiled. Let's talk about why Pokemon Scarlet and Violet are beautiful disasters. I feel like starting this video off, I should probably talk about what's objectively wrong with the game. While everyone has their own opinions about what's good and what's bad with a video game, I feel like Scarlet and Violet just have things that are intrinsically awful. While there are so many things about Scarlet and Violet that are hard for me to overlook, honestly, I think it comes down to the graphical issues. And no, I'm not necessarily talking about the art style. We'll talk about that a little bit later. I think the first thing that we need to address here is the awful frame rates and the buggy graphical issues that happen constantly. No matter where I decided to go in this region, whether it was around the time of the first gym or the final gym, I was running into the same issues everywhere. Pokemon not having clean animations, the game not loading in correctly, different things happening, awful battles. You know, we'll talk about it. We'll get into the details here in a second. I'm going to be honest with you. I have the script on my phone right now. I'm going to read off exactly what I wrote down. The pop-in feels even worse than Sword and Shield. Graphics on the sides of mountains are loading in as I walk next to them, glitching through the ground during Pokemon battles because they wanted to use a dynamic camera angle. Honestly, I think the worst thing for me is like the weird lighting issues. I mean, maybe that's not the worst thing in the world, but whenever like I would move the camera around and like light was like beaming off the back of my character, I'm hoping I found footage for that, but if I didn't, I'm sorry, it happened quite a few times, so I'm sure it'll be easy for me to find. This game feels like I'm beta testing an open world game. I mean, we have Breath of the Wild, which was made 6 years ago, and we just got Tears of the Kingdom, which in terms of the way that the world looks, it has similar graphics, but on the other hand, it also has some upgrades. How does Pokemon look and run this awful whenever in Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, you're actually doing fighting. You are fighting things. You are summoning powers. In Pokemon, you're just running around, just enjoying the world, doing your thing, throwing Pokemon out, your battles are turn-based battles. So there was more going on in Legends Arceus than there is in this game, and Legends Arceus runs better than this. Oh, my cat is below my feet. I'm gonna let him out of the room. Go ahead, Peanut. I'm not the biggest stickler when it comes to graphics or if a game has some bugs or has some issues. So I try and look past them and I try and play the game for what it is. Obviously, like I mentioned in the intro for this video, Pokemon is my all-time favorite franchise. I love it. I have a whole YouTube channel around it. But when you release a game in such a state that I just can't get behind, it makes it so difficult for me to enjoy it because every 5 seconds the only thing I'm seeing is pop-in, graphical issues, bad frame rates, and my brain instantly goes to those things. If I really had to pick the worst thing, because there's a lot of worst things in this game, the worst thing is the freaking weather effects, whether it's snow, rain. I don't think there's sandstorms in this game. At least I didn't see any in the little desert biome area. But man, the rain. I had a little clip in the intro where I was playing through that Team Star base, and I'll talk about that. Actually, I probably will talk about it here in a second because I think it's right next in the script. But man, the game just ends up crawling. Like, I don't know what it is about it. There's just too much going on, especially whenever I'm in the actual Team Star base, right? Throwing out 3 Pokemon. They're doing their own battles. I'm running around. It's already laggy as it is at a normal Team Star base. But now you add rain on top of that, and you're running around like you look like this. Okay, I get it. I sound like a hater. I've just been yelling and talking about the things that I don't like. My girlfriend is literally going to watch this back and call me a hater. If I remember, I will record her reaction to this part of the video and I will stick it right here.
I didn't know you were such a hater.
I just want to end this section by talking a little bit about just how I feel. I mean, the graphical issues and just the things that happened, they definitely bogged down my experience. While I wouldn't say my opinion is as low as some people's, I definitely understand why this is a killer for some people. Graphical issues and graphical problems they don't make a game better. They are warranted. These games have warranted critiques and warranted reviews because they're broken and they should be fixed. The Pokemon, or the Pokemon Company, I should say, has so much money. They are literally the highest grossing franchise of all time. And I get that comes from the video games, the Pokemon, the trading cards, the plushies, the TV shows, the movies, the merchandise. Mostly comes from the merchandise. But that doesn't mean that you can't put more emphasis on the game, because here's my thing about the whole, and then we'll get into the actual review for Scarlet and Violet, because I want to talk about this. The Pokemon Company, they don't put enough stock in the video games. Where do you think the Pokemon designs, the premise for the next anime, the TCG cards, everything stems from these games? So they've been pushing them out every 2 years, every year for so long that now when they're trying to make them these big, expansive, crazy things, and they just can't, they don't have enough time. They need more time, they need more people, they need to expand their team, they need to make bigger games, they need to pump more money into these games, because if they don't, they're gonna start losing all of their fans. It's just gonna be children playing their games again, and maybe that's all they care about, and maybe that's all. Maybe we're thinking too far into what makes Pokemon Pokemon. If they don't look at the problems that arose in Generation 9, Generation 10 has no room to succeed. And I think that's the scariest thing about the future of Pokemon as a whole. Okay, so now that I scared you a little bit and went off the rails there at the end, let's get into the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet review, because I'm kind of tired of rambling. It's time for our third costume change now. To be fair, it's been about a week and a half since I recorded the first 2 portions of this video. Mostly because I recorded the whole thing, I was editing it, I didn't really like it that much, so I decided to rewrite some of the script and then re-record some of it. So that's why I'm here now, re-recording some of the video. You'll get to see those portions again, because I'll bring some of it back, but for the most part I will be in this blue-ish shirt. So let's get back into the review. We start off this game as the new kid, just like Generation 6, 7, and 8. What sets this game apart from those games though is that we're actually going to a school, or the academy. While I think this is a welcome change, the actual school aspect of this game is a little bit lost on me. I recently played through Hogwarts Legacy, and while the classes in that game did get pretty annoying towards the end of the game, as it forced me to go to class and not play the ending of the story, I feel like this game would have done a little bit more of a service to the school aspect if it actually made me interact with the classes, because in Hogwarts Legacy it made me interact with the castle and see things that I probably wouldn't have seen otherwise. I feel like there's not really any incentive to go back and do the available classes that open up to you as you play the game, besides maybe learning about some side characters or some of the teachers that are in the school, but really they don't have any consequences on the story because most of them are side characters that just don't come back. How about we get back to talking about my actual journey through the game and not the things that I don't like. As we're getting ready to head off on our first day of school, we're actually greeted in our home by Director Clavel, who is the leader of the school that we're going to, who has a surprise for us, the player. The director leads us outside where he shows us the 3 starter Pokemon of Paldea. We're then asked to meet him down the road, and we're given a little bit of time to interact with the starters and kind of make a decision on which one we want the most. While this generation may be one of my least favorite starter trios, I do love the personality that the game gives each Pokemon individually. They started this trend back in Generation 7 with Sun and Moon, and honestly, I think it's only gotten better since then. After making my way down to what seems to be my neighbor's house, we get to not only pick our starter Pokemon, but we also get to meet one of the characters that we'll be seeing a bunch of this game, Nemona. I chose Sprigatito, I named it after my cat Peanut, and then I was instantly challenged by Nemona to a battle. Nemona is looking for a worthy rival, so she decides to raise a brand new Pokemon team alongside us to help us grow and get stronger. I say decides to raise a brand new team because, well, surprise, she's actually a champion level Pokemon trainer already. Sadly, after this battle with Nemona, the game starts to get a little stale for me. After the battle, you're basically thrust down this linear tube of activities. You do the catching tutorial with Nemona, then you run into a Lechonk that you have to battle, and I guess you don't have to catch, but I caught it. The length of the tutorial, at least for me, felt somewhat similar to something like Sun and Moon, but that's a topic for another day. Unlike in Generation 8 when you get to skip the catching tutorial if you've already caught a Pokemon on Route 1, you have to go through the catching tutorial in this game, and then you have to catch the Lechonk right afterward. I think Generation 9 has a pretty wide assortment of amazing Pokemon. Lechonk isn't one of them for me. Exploring the area a little bit and walking up the hill towards the lighthouse, you find your respective legendary of the game lying on the ground in a weak state off of a cliff. After feeding it a sandwich from our mother that she gave us for lunch, we are then tasked with following this large dragon where it comes to our rescue and brings us back to where we fell. Also, can we talk about how freaking strong Rotom has to be to catch us when we leap off cliffs? This encounter leads us to meeting Arven, another key player in this story, who also, of course, wants us to battle him. After you defeat Arven, you also find out that he used to be the caretaker for the Pokemon that you just found that saved you. He then decides that if the Pokemon likes you more, then you can have it. Thankfully, at this point, the game gets a bit more open, and I did have a blast exploring this little miniature area before rocking up to the first big city. I ended up catching a few team members for the time being, and just overall tested the waters to see what I could do before I had to go back to the main story. This is where I hit the first big wall of disappointment for me though. I couldn't enter any of the buildings. The Pokemon centers aren't even really Pokemon centers anymore. I understand if you want to have Pokemon centers all over the map to create these stands and have them like out in the wild. But why can't we get normal buildings in cities? I always loved coming up to a town and looking for where the Pokemon centers were in this brand new space I'd never seen before. In Paldea, they all just feel like rest stops. They just sit at the entrances and exits of each town like I should be visiting them and parking my bike at them before I enter the town. While I would love to get into the region and its design in more detail, now is just not the time. But mark my words, I'm very disappointed in what we were given. I honestly didn't think it could be worse than the Galar region, and yet here we are. As it turns out, Nemona is waiting for us at the front gate of Mesagoza City. This is not only where our school resides, but it's also the main hub of the game. Before we can enter the city, however, Nemona challenges us to a battle. Here we get to see a taste of this game's battle mechanic called terastallization, where a Pokemon can change its form depending on the terastallized type. After we defeat her, we're then allowed to enter the city. While Mesagoza is also plagued with the same problems as many of the other towns in Paldea, it's also plain to see how much time was crafted into the look and feel of this specific town. They wanted this city to feel grand in size, and the massive staircase you see when you arrive is all you need to know how much time they put into this. This is also where the game picks the reins back up and pushes you down another set of linear steps, not to make a pun. On the way up to the school to meet Nemona, we run into Penny, the third and final character that's important to this narrative. It looks as though she's being pressured by some of Team Star's members, which is this game's evil team, to join up. So in grand fashion, we decide to defeat the Team Star members and help Penny out, but after the first battle, Nemona finds us and gives us the Terra Orb. With the Terra Orb, we then gain the power to use terastallization on our own in battle, and then after defeating Team Star, we enter the school for the first time. I don't really want to go into detail too much on this part of the game because frankly it doesn't really matter that much. Like I mentioned before, I didn't really go back to the school all that often, and you'll see why, at least I'll explain why. Honestly, I just thought it was a little boring. The school isn't freely accessible. To move around the space, you have to use the consoles and choose what room you'd like to essentially warp to. This is honestly a huge letdown for me, and one of the main reasons I never ended up doing the classes or spending a lot of time at the academy whatsoever. At this point in the game, we meet up with our soon-to-be rivals once more. Nemona mentions the gym challenge and how it might be something that we might be interested in as the players. Arvin mentions that he wants to go on a journey to hunt for some herbs that he found in a book, and we get a call from a character named Cassiopeia that they don't really say much of anything, but they do kind of open the doorway to the third story that we'll talk about in a bit. We also get a chance to meet the professor of the Paldea region, which also happens to be over a video call. This might be the first generation to have you not meet the professor in person, but also the first game where the professor isn't a huge part of getting the story started, which is really cool to me. I mean, in Sun and Moon, you do technically meet Kukui over video call, but as soon as you get to the region, you also meet him in person, so I guess that might be the disconnect. The professor tasks us with watching over the legendary and help get its strength back somehow. Once this is all completed, we are now able to truly experience what this game has to offer. And while I think it has its merits, I also think it let me down more than I wish it did. First, however, let's chat about the 3 storylines we are tasked with completing and how I feel about them. The 3 storylines are as follows. Number 1, the Champion's Path. This is the gyms, the Elite Four, the champion battles, and that is with Nimona. The second path is the Legends Path, where you go through and you fight the Titan Pokemon with Arvin in hopes of finding the herbs he's hunting for. And number 3, we have Star Street, or Operation Starfall. This storyline follows Team Star, where you work with Penny and Cassiopeia to take down the evil team of this generation. If I had to choose the best path in the game, I would probably have to choose the Legend Path with Arvin, but first I want to talk about the Gym Challenge, or more formally called the Champion's Path. In my opinion, Scarlet and Violet really dropped the ball with the Gym Challenge, but for a few separate reasons. The first thing I want to talk about before getting into the things I don't like is that deep down, Game Freak didn't want this game to be about the gyms, or the challenge to become the champion at all. I should also preface that this is mostly an opinion and how I feel after playing through the whole game. This isn't actually what happened or what the story is about. I just want to preface that. The gyms feel almost like an afterthought while playing through the game, and honestly, after the credits rolled in my game and I sat down to really think about it, it only got worse. The gym challenge and the Team Star stuff feel like side quests to the main quest of helping Arvin and finding out the truth about Area Zero. I just wish the game treated it like that. The game doesn't have to focus on the gyms anymore to make me happy as a person. I would love a compelling story and have the gyms as a side objective that I can use to level up for a fun challenge. Instead of that, we got a game where everything is the main focus. This game doesn't have a set path, but the only way that I could feasibly do everything at the correct level was to go online and find a map, or basically a step-by-step directional guide on what to do and when. Just like in every game before it, this game falls back into the same pitfalls as before, only this time it's masqueraded as an open world game where you can do anything you want. Now, don't get me wrong here, I do love the open world and I think exploring it was an amazing time, but what was the point of making the game like this if they weren't going to give us a clear objective or at least level scaling to allow us to do the objectives in any order we wanted? I was left taking myself out of the game after every major battle just to mark which one came next so I wouldn't end up being too underleveled for what I was trying to accomplish. In this aspect of the game, I think Scarlet and Violet fail to be even close to a compelling open world game. In another aspect though, I think it makes the game incredibly cool and fun, and that is finding and catching the Pokemon themselves. I promise that this will eventually tie back into the gym challenge, but I want to talk about the Pokemon I used for a second in my hunt for finding them. This game was such a fun adventure when I was looking for the Pokemon I wanted to add to my team long term. It's probably one of the things that I'll look back most fondly on this generation later in life as well. Whether that was finding a Charcadet and trying to figure out how to evolve it into Armarouge, or that when I went to get the Bronzor shards for the item to evolve the Charcadet, I ended up stumbling on Tinkatuff, a Pokemon I've been wanting to use on my team but I couldn't find anywhere. I looked up a list of Pokemon that were in Scarlet and Violet to see what all I could use, and when I saw Annihilape, I instantly changed my mind from wanting to use the new Tauros and went all in on a Pokemon I've used dozens of times before. This all culminated in my search for the new pseudo-legendary in the Paldea region, Baxcalibur. I went on this big long search through the cold and snowy areas of the region, all in hopes of finding a Frigibax to call my own, and after a little while of searching, I finally found one. This is the first game that I actually felt like I was going on a journey to create my team. Usually it feels like I just stumbled upon a really cool Pokemon and I end up adding it to my team just because I was going that way and it was there. But as everything happens, there is a problem, and this is where it ties back to the fact that there's absolutely no level scaling in this game. The map or regions of this game is kind of set up like an MMO. Each region of the map has specifically leveled Pokemon the entire time you're playing. The top or the higher areas of the map, like the snowy region or the gigantic lake, are going to have higher level Pokemon, while the grasslands around where your adventure started are going to mostly have a lower level Pokemon. This kind of contradicts the idea of this game being open world and allowing you to go and do anything and everything wherever you want to, and it kind of just hopes that you play the game in a specific order, because if you don't, then you're going to be fighting Pokemon that are crazy high level. In older titles, Pokemon would obey their trainer no matter what, as long as you were the original trainer. Winning gyms really only helped traded mons obey trainers up to a specific level. In Scarlet and Violet, however, beating a gym raises the level of Pokemon that will obey you in general. This means you can't go out and catch a super high level Pokemon, and because you're the original trainer, it will just obey you no matter what. I like this, and at the same time, I don't. This limits the Pokemon you're able to use at any given point during a playthrough, and while during a normal linear game I think that it's great, during an open world game that lets you catch Pokemon anywhere and everywhere, I think that it's kind of a letdown. They could have kept all of this the same and just added level scaling, allowing Pokemon to have a certain range they could be level-wise depending on the amount of badges you've completed. I think my enjoyment of this game just falls back to level scaling and how everything has to be done in a specific order no matter what to ensure you don't get mollywopped at the next gym or Titan battle. I also despise Goldango. I know it's probably someone's favorite Pokemon, but whoever made the Applejacks mascot the 1000th Pokemon, this big, gigantic, cool number, they should not design Pokemon anymore. Just saying. I feel like I could go on forever about my complaints with this storyline or with how the level scaling affects everything, but overall I think it was pretty middle of the road. While I do think it could be better, I also had to realize that this game was fully about Area Zero and accept that the gym challenge was a big long side mission just to get me stronger as a trainer. I also want to mention that I think the only memorable characters that come from this storyline are Nemona, probably one of my favorite rivals, and Larry, the normal type gym leader and later an Elite Four member who uses flying type Pokemon. Nemona's fight after you become the champion is actually really difficult. Hell, I even lost at the last Mon because I was dumb and let her set up with her starter Pokemon. Gameplay wise, I did have a lot of fun, and without the gym challenge, I don't think I would have trekked halfway across the maps looking for the different Pokemon or just trying to get leveled up enough so that I could take on this next gym. I do kind of wish we could go back to fun little puzzles though. These gym puzzles just didn't really hit for me. Let's talk about Penny and Operation Starfall. I would like to keep this section short and sweet because I think it may just be the most boring part of Scarlet and Violet. And that's saying a lot. I not only disliked a lot of the story beats, but I also hated actually taking on the Team Star bases. You are tasked with taking out 5 of these bases by Cassiopeia, who ends up being the leader of Team Star. While I thought that the auto battling and the Reverum fight were pretty cool for the first Team Star base, the issue was that I had to do that again for 4 more bases. And when I say again, I mean the exact same thing 4 times, but with different types, and there are still Reverum as the final boss Pokemon of each battle. I do find the story of Team Star compelling, but really only once you reach the end and you find out who the leader is and the backstory and all of the members. While playing through it, I didn't really care that much, and I kind of found myself doing something else in the background while I was just hitting the A button over and over and over again, hoping that the cutscenes would end. This portion of the game ends up feeling kind of like filler, and after reflecting back on it, I can say that if I were to replay this game, it would probably be the toughest part to get back through. But, and this is a big but here, I think it is necessary to give us the backstory we needed for not only Penny, but allowing us to get insight into director Clavel and his motivations and why he wants to see Team Star so badly. In this storyline, the director is dressed up as a student who is named Clive, who helps us along the way as we take down different bases. This entire time he's asking them about their motivations and why they wanted to do the things that they do, like bully the other students. Towards the end of this story, after we defeat all 5 of the Team Star bosses, we're challenged to Cassiopeia for one big, massive final battle to end Team Star for good. After we make our way to the meeting spot for this final battle, Director Clavel walks out and pretends to be the leader of Team Star. While this doesn't really make a lot of sense, it's also really nice because you can see that after finding out all of the details and all of the story about Team Star, he realizes that he doesn't want it to end because these students are using it as a safe space. But after we beat Director Clavel, it is off to fight the actual final fight, Penny. This whole time, Penny's been kind of helping you behind the scenes. She's been hacking in and giving you points to make TMs and giving you Pokemon parts and doing all this stuff on the back end and just helping you on your journey. Penny being the final boss of this storyline didn't really surprise me that badly, but it was really cool to get down to the nitty-gritty of the story and see why they didn't want Team Star to exist anymore, considering that they created Team Star to be this safe space for bullied students. The ending is just so touching. You get to defeat Penny, and that prompts the other Team Star leaders who are hiding and watching the battle to come out, and they all forgive each other for the things that they did and said and the things that Penny have done, and they become a group of friends again. Director Clavel also asked them to come back to school and keep running Team Star as camps to help train different students. I think at the end of all of this, I just wish there was a bit more payoff to the full story. I mean, yeah, Penny is apparently a super genius and helps us down in Area Zero, but is that all this story really has to offer? I would also love to see a return to form with the team that's a bit more evil and maybe has a hand in the plot of these games again, but if the trend continues, I don't think that is going to be the case anytime soon. Wow, that was a lot. Why don't we talk about Arven and the Legend storyline now before I run out of things to say? There are quite a lot of things to cover in this section, and since it's my favorite, I also don't have a lot of negatives, but that doesn't mean I don't have any at all. Arven originally starts the game off as a standoffish person, and he rarely goes to class. After meeting us, the player character, out by the lighthouse, he does take an interest in us and asks for our help in taking down a list of 5 different Titan Pokemon in order to get access to these magical herbs. At first, we don't know why we're being tasked with helping him, but as we go through his story, we find out that Arven's Mabostiff was gravely injured, and he is hoping the herbs will help cure its sickness. In the end, we figure out that not only are the herbs helping to restore Mabostiff, but they're also restoring the strength of our legendary partner as we're feeding them the sandwiches that are made of the herbs as well. This storyline has to be one of the best pieces of fiction Game Freak has created in some time. I came to love Arven as a character, and I could really feel his emotion, even without voice acting, when he was searching for a way to cure his partner Pokemon. The gameplay was honestly no slouch either. While a lot of the Titan Pokemon aren't my favorite new Mons from Generation 9, I did have quite a lot of fun with the fights. It kind of reminded me of the trial battles with the Totem Pokemon in the Alola region. None of the battles ended up being too difficult, and the fake out at the end where there were 2 different Titan Pokemon we had to take down was pretty fun. This storyline just felt the most cohesive to me, and even with it being a bit repetitive, I ended up enjoying myself quite a lot. Moving forward, I would love to see Titan Pokemon make a return in some way. I'm not sure how they would continue the trend, but it was nice to have these extra battles that go alongside the gym challenge. This is exactly what I was looking for in Alola whenever they released the Ultra games. I think they did such an amazing job implementing these big Titan battles alongside the gym battles, and I hope that we continue to see this trend for games on games on games. However, this isn't where Arven's story ends though. Arven is also one of the key players in the finale of this story alongside Penny, Nimona, and us, the playable character. Towards the end of the Legend storyline, we find out that the professor that had asked us to take care of our legendary partner was actually Arven's parent, and that they have been absent from their lives for a very long time. The professor asks Arven to show us to their lab since he is the only person who can let us in with their key. After walking into the dusty old lab that's underneath the lighthouse where we first met Arven, the professor pops up on the screen and asks us for some help with something down in Area 0. After we accept the mission and the video cuts off, Arven is extremely on edge with what's going on. It's at this point that we learn his Mabostif was injured down in Area 0, and that there are Pokemon that live down there that we couldn't even imagine. Arven is determined to stop us from making this journey, so he challenges us to one final battle. This battle was not only kind of difficult because I was a little bit underleveled, but it was also cool to see him use all of the Pokemon that he had been using to fight the Titans alongside his partner Mabostif to battle you. When you defeat him, he agrees that we may have the strength needed to take on Area 0, but he's coming with us, and we need to get more people involved, which includes Nemona and Penny. I think it's time we finally talk about Area 0 and the story that happens there. This may be one of the absolute best finales to a Pokemon game ever, so let's talk about why. The finale of this game can only be taken on once you defeat Arven, Nemona, and Penny, finishing all 3 storylines, and convince them to come with you to explore the giant crater in the middle of the map you haven't seen yet, Area 0. After doing some coaxing, you finally convince the legendary Miraidon or Koraidon to join you in allowing you to glide down into this brand new portion of the map that you haven't seen before. Once you get down there, your legendary does not follow you. You can't ride it, you have to do the whole thing on foot. But I think that's okay. Area 0 is beautiful. While the music of Generation 9 has been amazing in its own right, and I think that some of the tracks have been very enjoyable, nothing can top this anime as hell track that plays as you wander around this barren wasteland of an area with these Pokemon that haven't been anywhere else in the region. The track adds this tension and mysterious feeling as you're walking around and exploring the final area of the game. Once you touch down inside the crater, you're tasked with the party to go around to 4 different research centers that are in Area 0 to unlock one of the 4 locks that are needed to enter the lab down at the bottom layer. You find out that the professor was locked down inside the lab and they couldn't leave. And at this point, I kind of suspected that maybe someone like Arven or someone else maybe locked them in there for some reason. Maybe they were like a terribly bad person. Maybe they were corrupted by whatever is creating these paradox Pokemon. I really wasn't sure where the story was going to go, but I expected them to be evil and for us unlocking those 4 locks to let out this giant evil. But I was very wrong. After we make it down to the final level of Area 0, we are attacked by a large group of Paradox Pokemon that we have to defeat, as well as a more stronger version, I should say, of our legendary Pokemon that kind of scares our legend away from helping anyone. While I do find the idea of there being more than one legendary Pokemon of the same exact Pokemon a little weird, I guess I should say a little interesting, I do still love the designs and the aspect around Paradox Pokemon. I didn't really put a lot of stuff in the script about Paradox Pokemon, and I didn't really spend a lot of time thinking about them, but I did want to go off script for a second and just talk about Paradox Pokemon and why I like them. I think as a gimmick or as a cool aspect to the games, I think future and past versions of Pokemon that we already know and like that maybe shake up the metagame or give us something new to look forward to is really cool. In the past, I probably would know more information about the Pokemon, like their base stats or different typings or maybe anything in general when it comes to that kind of stuff. At this point, I really don't know what else I could say about them because I don't know a lot about them stat-wise. I'm kind of going into this portion of the video blind, but I will say that I do love their designs, and I love that they were added and given a little bit of a different look in terms of the final battle of the game. Having to fight 6 Pokemon that look like these mons that you've already fought in the past but are completely different is so cool. The only thing I think I would change about them is probably their names, just because I think their names are a little bit forgettable. But overall, I do love the Paradox Pokemon, and I would love to see them come back in some form, even though I know that's probably not going to happen, but I can wish. I think at the end of the day, the only thing that I wished was that maybe there were some more Paradox Pokemon roaming around Area Zero that you could catch or just see, or maybe after you beat this portion, maybe there were Paradox Pokemon around the world, and maybe that's the case because I haven't really played the game past the credits, but I do love the thought of what Paradox Pokemon are. It's so funny to me because a lot of the times Pokemon have these big set pieces at the end of the game, like the champions quarters, right? Whenever you're ending the game and there are these big massive corridors in these crazy looking areas. And for this game, the champions corridor didn't really exist. You just fought on a rooftop. But man, oh man, is the like time machine area of the Area Zero lab look like the most final boss area I've ever seen in a Pokemon game ever. Major spoilers here, so just be warned, but at this point in the game, you do find out that the professor that you've been talking to has actually been dead for a few years. The legendary that we have at our side actually ended up being in a huge accident, and the professor sacrificed their life to save our legendary partner. This professor that we've not only been talking to the entire playthrough as they've been giving us hints and just video calling us and just calling us in general, and the one that we're talking to right now in the game is actually an AI that was built by the original professor so that they would have someone to work with and talk to. So they have all of their memories and all of their speech patterns, so they look basically identical to them. This was a twist that, while I didn't see coming, I kind of figured that something like this was going to happen, but I wondered what Arven was going to say whenever he found out that his parent was actually dead. The AI has also been trying to tell Arven this for a few years now, and it just can't figure out how to explain to him that their parent has died. So from this point on, I'm just going to call them the professor, even though they're not necessarily the professor, but it just makes things easier. At this point, the professor leads us into the final room, which was the big boss area that I was talking about before, where we take the book that Arven gives us and we use it to activate the time machine. But there's a catch. The AI brought us down here because they want to shut the time machine off. The Paradox Pokemon are running rampant. The whole reason that it's locked down here is because of that issue. So there ends up being a failsafe in this system that as soon as you turn the operations of the time machine off, the professor or the AI will flip and basically go into defense mode. It will try to attack and kill us and not allow us to do anything. We basically are sitting ducks and we have to fight this AI to turn off the time machine. We do what the AI asks us to do and we turn off the time machine, which then turns into this like amazing all-out brawl between the AI and us, our team of Pokemon that we've been using this entire playthrough, and then a group of Paradox Pokemon that they have on their team that they have pulled from the time machine and that they own. This part of the game was crazy to me because while I was fighting Pokemon that I knew at least somewhat, I didn't know their new types, I didn't know their new abilities, and I didn't know what new moves they might know. So this battle was actually kind of hard, but also was kind of easy once I inferred what their actual typings were, and then I could just basically one-shot them. So after you defeat the 6 Paradox Pokemon that the professor uses, the system kind of goes haywire. It's like, there's no way that I could lose, you know, blah, 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 and it shuts down the use of Pokeballs. So you can't use your Pokeballs. You can't let any of your Pokemon out to do their thing. And then this Pokeball drops from the time machine, they toss it out, and it ends up being a fully powered up version of your legendary. And there's nothing you can do about it. This is when the miraculous happens, just like every other Pokemon game, and your legendary Pokemon decides to gain the courage to fight next to its new partner, its new trainer, the person that has gifted them all this power. They pop out of their Pokeball, you use their immaculate power to destroy the legendary that is definitely much stronger than them, and that's the end of the game. That's how the game ends. You defeat the other legendary with your legendary. It becomes your Pokemon, a part of your team that you can battle with now, and the story goes on basically in cutscenes. After being defeated, the AI decides to do one final thing. It uses the time machine to go back in time, at least for me because I was playing Scarlet. If you're in Violet, I'm sure they go forward in time to the time where they want to live, where they can explore the world and see the Pokemon, because that's the whole reason they did this to begin with. They wanted to see what kinds of Pokemon existed in this new or different era. So they decide, okay, if this is happening, if the time machine is getting shut down, then I'm going to live out my days, the rest of my days, in this different timeline. And I thought this was interesting because you get to see it from Arvin's perspective. His parent is dead. This AI really isn't their parent, but it kind of is their parent because it has their mannerisms, their speech patterns, their look. And so this could be a chance to revitalize their relationship, but the AI leaves and he doesn't get that. He doesn't get anything like that, and he's left feeling pretty alone at that point in the game, and honestly pretty sad. The game doesn't end here though. It ends with all 4 characters, yourself, Nimona, Penny, and Arvin, all leaving Area Zero and deciding to go the long way home. They have all become great friends. They all want to do another journey. They want to explore the world together, and they want to have a good time. And I think that this is wonderful. I think it's such a good way to end this game that built up these relationships so perfectly. This might be the first Pokemon game that introduces more than one character and actually makes your relationship with them feel meaningful and like it really means something to not only the player's character but the player themselves. It genuinely feels like we have become friends with the 3 characters that we went into Area Zero with, and that their adventures are going to continue after we turn the screen off and we move on to the next game. While I think we have a long way to go before we get to the perfect Pokemon game, I think the Area Zero storyline really shows that they do care about how these stories end and how they want these stories to feel. And coming off of Generation 8 with the Darkest Day storyline, they've really took strides to make the story better and something that people will want to talk about like I'm doing right now. Area Zero might have been the thing that just saved Scarlet and Violet for me. So with recording all of this stuff, I do have a couple other things I would like to talk about, because after writing the full script and then rewriting the script, I realized there were a couple of things that I had missed that I feel like I could talk about off script a little bit. So I have a little bit of a bullet point list here. The first thing I would like to talk about is just how bland and boring the region is to me. While I don't think that the Paldea region is necessarily the most boring region in terms of how it looks, because of the way that you traverse it and how it's just this big one massive landmass, it makes it slightly more boring to me than something like Galar or Sinnoh. I mean, even the biomes and the way that they act, they remind me similarly of something like Black and White, but since it's an open world game and I can run anywhere and everywhere, the biomes feel like they're scaled a lot worse just because of how quickly I can get through the areas to go do basically whatever I want to. I think moving forward, we really need to implement some kind of objective system or level scaling so that while I'm going around the game and the map, it gives me a reason to explore these areas a little bit more and not just fall to the wayside and go do the next big battle I need to do and blah, 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 blah. I think there has to be some reason to explore, whether that be adding something like shrines in Breath of the Wild or some reason to make me want to go off the beaten path, not just to find my way to the next objective. I'm not really sure how they can go about that in the next Pokemon game, because I'm sure we probably won't see Generation 10 until at least 2025 or maybe even 2026, depending on what we see this year for Pokemon Day. But I'm not really sure where we're going to go from here, but I'm hoping that maybe we can take a step forward in terms of map and region design. The next thing I want to mention is voice acting. I know everyone has said it, everyone has mentioned it when they've made a review of this game, but I really would love to see voice acting in Generation 10 or in remakes or anything that they come out with. I think that as the highest grossing franchise of all time, they could pay some voice actors and make some really cool and effective story points. I mean, these cutscenes are lost on me, mostly because I don't want to read constantly over and over again, and I've been having this problem for a long time, but I think it's become most apparent with games like Legends Arceus and Scarlet and Violet and Sword and Shield, these big games that are on the Switch that probably should have at least a little bit of dialogue, even if it's just the big cutscenes. I think we should probably have them available to us to watch and to listen, not watch and read. Other than that, I think that the games are overall just a little bit forgettable for me. I think in the long run that Scarlet and Violet will fall pretty low on my list in terms of favorite Pokemon games, if it wasn't for Area Zero, which, I mean, obviously I mentioned in the last little bit that if it wasn't for Area Zero, I think Scarlet and Violet would be very, very low, if not last on my list. And that little bit of story definitely saved these games from falling super far for me. Where will it end up on the list? I have no idea, because I haven't wanted to rank Pokemon games in a long time, but I'm not really sure. Oh, I also wish they would bring back more regional variants. I know we had Pokemon like Toadschool and Toadscruel, and we had a few like offshoot Pokemon, but they weren't like regional variants. We had Clodsire, and we had Paldean Wooper, and we had Paldean Tauros, but I just wish that they had more of them. I'm hoping that they're not dialing those back, because I think they're one of the coolest things that the Game Freak has ever done in Pokemon, and if they stop making them, I know a lot of us fans are going to be pretty disappointed. While I think this is a step in the right direction, I don't know how long I can use that excuse for the Pokemon franchise. I mean, I haven't played the DLC yet, but honestly, I'm not that excited about it. Hopefully I won't be cutting back to this clip when I play through it all and make a video about it later, but Pokemon Scarlet and Violet have finally laid the groundwork for what the Pokemon series will look like in the future. But if Generation 10 is another step, not a completed product like we've been hoping for, I think we're all going to be very disappointed. Thank you so much for checking out my Pokemon Scarlet and Violet review. If you did enjoy yourself, make sure you're hitting that sub button, make sure you're hitting the like button, make sure you're hitting the bell so you can see all of my future uploads. This is the first of many videos that I have planned down the line. I have a list of completed video games and other video ideas that I would like to do on the channel. So if you did enjoy yourself, make sure you're hitting that like button, and I can't wait to catch you back here next time for whatever comes out next. I haven't decided exactly what video will be coming, but hopefully you'll see something next month. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.